My name's Araceli Cruz, and I am so proud to have graduated from Linfield back in 2009. So a few years ago now. And, I really loved my experience as a first generation Latina attending Linfield college at the time, and just learned a lot from that experience. And I started out as a biology major because I wanted to go into medical school. And as I had more opportunities to explore the education options at Linfield, I ended up switching my major to sociology and Spanish. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that because sociology was really just a game changer for me in my career trajectory, but also I think being able to major in Spanish, travel abroad, even though Spanish is my native language, I'm really grateful for the formal education that I got at Linfield, because not only did it improve my literacy and my language around that, but also it really provided me an opportunity to grow and affirm my own identity and my background. And so I really give Linfield a lot of credit for supporting me in my identity development as well. Um, so I currently serve as the Assistant Vice President for Global Diversity and Inclusion at Portland State University. And am really focused on supporting institutions on becoming minority serving institutions and really meeting the needs of our diverse student population here in Oregon. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can do a better job of serving our students and what those needs are. I think, like everybody else, we all have a multitude of identities. Some of them can be a little bit more front and center, and particularly as it influences the work or kind of our life trajectory. But I think for me, being first generation and Latina has really been drivers of my career and things that I'm really passionate about. And so I often tell people, when you're a first generation student, there's a lot of things that you have to learn and you kind of have to depend on yourself to learn them. But being first gen doesn't just stop at the undergraduate level or graduate level, right? For me, it has been an identity that I carry even as a professional. So I often say I'm a first gen professional, right? Because I'm the first in my family to really be working in the setting that I do. And I think what I've learned along the way is there's a lot of things that I don't know, but there's a lot of things that I do know, right? And I think we often focus a lot on kind of what first generation students lack versus kind of what they're bringing to campus, all the rich talents and skills, right, that students bring to campus that really make a really beautiful experience if we really validate those experiences, right? And so for me, I've had a lot of mentors along the way who have really supported me, who have, overcome their own challenges and barriers and are really dedicated to making sure that those barriers are removed for those that are coming up after them. And so I really accredit all of my achievements and accomplishments to all the people who have supported me. And a lot of people have come from Linfield University. So a lot of faculty, a lot of staff, former supervisors who continue to be invested in my life's work and continue to be, colleagues and friends and mentors have been really, I would say, really critical in just what I do now. And so for me, it's important to give back in the same way that others have kind of supported me and have helped me in this journey. There's a lot of definitions around what mentorship is, and just lots of research around that. And I think sometimes people get kind of intimidated. What does it mean to be in a mentorship relationship? And for me, I have both formal and informal mentors where I have formally asked, like, can you be my mentor through this process? Or and then some of them have just been like organic kind of relationships that have been formed, right? And so and I know that people are busy and you have to really have a purpose and a clear understanding of where are the areas of support that you need. And so for me, I myself mentor people, particularly those that want to go into higher education, but not necessarily limited to those that want to go into higher ed, just really being open, if somebody just needs a different perspective or needs, support finding resources, or they want to get connected to somebody else. Like oftentimes, I don't necessarily know everything. But I may have a friend or a colleague who may have that information. So being able to connect people has been really important for me. And then a lot of times what I've done is I have had more formal kind of short-term relationships that have really been established through different organizations that offer mentorship program. And I've always kept in touch with people. So I think, those relationships just continue to grow organically. And really provide people with the opportunity to understand that they are the experts in their own lived experience, right? So I'm just here to bring resources or support or listen. It's not me telling them what to do or what I think is best for them, but rather just co-creating an experience that will be beneficial for both of us, right? Because I think the most effective mentorship is a two-way mentorship, right? It's not just one person giving you that knowledge, but really putting yourself in a position where you can also learn from the other person. Yeah, I would say relationship building is key. I think that can be really intimidating because you can meet someone, right? And you can find them very inspiring, or you can really connect with what they're saying. And I think about this in the context of the classroom, right? Where you have guest speakers come, or if you go to an event after hours, and a lot of times, at least in my experience, a lot of the speakers or the facilitator or whoever, that's coming and sharing a particular set of skills or knowledge are really open to connecting with people and with students, and really open to helping in any way they can. And I think I always really encourage students to take advantage of that, like to go up to the speaker, to introduce themselves, to follow up, right? Even if it's just like, hey, you came to my school 2 weeks ago. I'm still really thinking about this particular thing that you said and how it's like, relevant to me. I think developing relationships like that can be really important because you never know when you're going to end up in a space where you might work together with this person, right? It may seem really distant, but in reality, the world is so small that you never know who you're going to end up in a room with, right? And so practicing those skills in college, I think, can be really helpful as you continue to prepare to go into the workforce, right? And that can be really helpful. I think as much as I loved my experience at Linfield, I did feel really lost after I graduated. And I think that's a very common experience, right? To feel lost, to think about like, well, what is it that I really want to do? Here I am, really proud to be able to cross the stage and very aware of all of the sacrifices and stress that come along with that. And then once you cross that stage, it's like, what do you do next? The doors don't magically open. And so I think that especially for students that don't have a big network prior to coming to college, it can continue to be challenging. And so I think making sure that every opportunity you have to develop a relationship or connect with somebody can be really helpful. I did a lot of stumbling around, but after college, I ended up doing a year of Vista AmeriCorps service, and I ended up doing it at YCAP, which is in McMinnville, so Yam Hill Community Action Partnership. And the reason I got connected to that organization is actually a full circle moment. One was during our capstone course, the executive director at the time came and spoke to our class. And after class, I went up to her and shared that when my family and I first immigrated to this country, we were living in Newburgh. And we experienced a lot of homelessness, a lot of lack of basic needs. And Yamhill Community Action Partnership was the organization that actually reached out to my family and was able to put us in a home, was able to just provide us with all the basic needs that we needed. And so I shared this with the executive director, and she was like, I would love for you to come like work for us. And they were in the middle of a capital campaign. And so I made the decision to accept the Vista AmeriCorps year, which I don't think my parents were very happy about because you don't make any money. I think you made like $9,000 for the year. And, you know, for my family, going to college was really a ticket to upward social mobility, right? And so then coming home and saying like, I'm going to take a job that doesn't pay anything was kind of really hard for my family to accept. But for me, in my heart, that was a way to give back. And I really enjoyed my time. I had one of the best supervisors who really worked with me to figure out what was I really passionate about, what were my interests, what did I want to continue exploring. And because of her, I was able to decide that I wanted to work with Latino students and that I wanted to help create pathways to college for this community. So after my year of Vista AmeriCorps, I ended up working for Adelante Mujeres, which is an organization in Forest Grove that really focuses on Latina women. And for me, I ended up working in the Adelante Chicas program, working with middle school and high school students, and then also working with their families to really help them navigate the college going process. And so I love my job, and I loved working with that particular community and seeing other Latinas that look like me that were also immigrant, first gen, you know, Latinas. And after about 2 years, we had 95% graduation rates, which was really, really great. But what I was noticing is that a lot of these students were really leaving their institutions after the first semester. And so a lot of it was because one, it wasn't financially sustainable. Two, at that time, Oregon didn't have any services like tuition equity or the Oregon State aid application. So there wasn't a lot of opportunities for undocumented students to actually access higher education. A lot of my students went to community colleges because that was the only accessible choice for them at the time. And then, you know, for those that actually were able to attend a four-year university, a lot of them were coming back and saying, I just don't feel supported. There's no one that looks like me there. There's no one that speaks like me, eats like me. And it's just really hard, you know, to feel like I belong there. And so after that, that's when I was like, you know what, I really want to go into higher education because I want to be the support system that these students are looking for. And I also knew that I myself didn't have that in undergrad. And so I wanted to be able to provide and make the college experience better, you know, for people who higher ed wasn't made for, you know. And so that's how I ended up in higher education, and my entry was through financial aid. I actually started working at Linfield Portland campus, the nursing campus. I was a financial aid and scholarship outreach coordinator, and I absolutely love that job. When people ask me what has been your favorite like higher ed job, I would say that one was my favorite because all I had to do was give out scholarship money. So somebody would come to my office and be like, I need money for my bills. And I'd be like, okay, here's $5,000. Right. And so I never had to say no, never had to be like, oh, we can't help you. My sole job was really to give scholarship money away. And so for me, that was just such a beautiful kind of entryway into higher education, to really seeing, you know, how scholarships and partnerships can really make a difference in students' lives and really allow them to focus on nursing school rather than focusing on how are they going to pay the next bill, right? And so through that position, I was able to not only do that, but work with different donors and really think about how we're using our scholarship money, and just also kind of improving the process of what that looked like, but then also going out into the community and building partnerships and making sure that, Linfield was always at the table and being represented. When I was hired, I came towards the tail end of a particular government grant that was really focused on recruiting underserved and underrepresented students. So it gave me a really unique opportunity to kind of work within the realm of the entire institution. And in Portland, it was very small. So I got to partner a lot with the director of multicultural services. I got to partner with Residence Life, with the dean of students, with faculty. And so I would say it was just a really great balance of being able to understand how the institution worked at a higher level, but also do work that was really meaningful and impactful for me. When I was working at the Portland campus, my boss, who is Gerardo, the vice president of enrollment and student success, at the time was my supervisor. And I accredit a lot of my professional growth to him just by example and just his hard work and the legacy that he's left at Linfield. But I think that I really loved being in financial aid and understanding just a very complex system. I think even when you're speaking to native English speakers, financial aid is really hard to understand, and filing a FAFSA can be really stressful, and getting all your documentations for verification can be really helpful, even if in your native language. Now, I think it gets even more confusing when you're adding a second language, when you're adding different cultures. People perceive and utilize money in such different ways than what is established on the FAFSA or our financial aid system. And so I started getting really interested in being able to go out and specifically do outreach to our Latino community, because I did speak Spanish and I was able to kind of empower families to go through this very complicated system, and a system that creates a lot of mistrust, a lot of anxiety. So I really love that portion of my job where I could really go and outreach and explain FAFSA and explain financial aid in a culturally relevant way. And I think at that time, there weren't a lot of bilingual financial aid counselors. So I did a lot of the outreach and all across the state to different high schools. And so after that, I went to graduate school and at Lewis and Clark, and I also worked in the financial aid office there. And my graduate degree is in student affairs administration with a focus in equity and social justice. And so as I was learning and more and really, experiencing higher education and really putting into practice some of the theories and frameworks that I was learning, I started getting involved in OSFA, which is the state kind of financial aid Administrator Association. And so through that work, I did a lot of equity work. So I chaired the EDI committee and really supported financial aid administrators in their journey of DEI and thinking about how can we make financial aid more equitable for all students, right? Because we know that the demographics in Oregon are changing. And we know that we need to be proactive in thinking about, we can't serve students the same way that we've been serving them up until this point, right? And we know that the cost of college is rising and the financial aid available is not keeping up, right? So there's a lot of work that needed to happen around providing aid to undocumented students and keeping that information safe and being ethical about it. And also just really thinking about little things that we can change to make students feel more welcomed and kind of, I would say, lower that anxiety that students get when they go to financial aid, right? Because oftentimes those are very difficult conversations to have. And so I think just making sure that we were really figuring out what were the needs and what were the things that we could change, was really important. So I did a lot of work around that. And then I came to Linfield again at the main campus and continued the work around that and supported my department in the strategic planning and the policy, and really, thinking about what are things that we can do to be the best financial aid team, right? And so that we could be represented, we could be building those relationships and really helping our students. Now, obviously, there's federal regulations, there's limited funding, that can get in the way, but what is it that we can do, right? And what can we be really good at? And so I think that for one of the things that I really loved about being in financial aid, particularly at Linfield, is that you weren't isolated in financial aid. There was a lot of opportunity to be visible at different parts of the campus and be part of different programming. So during my time there, I did a lot of work with the First Gen program. So I was able to sit on the steering committee. We wrote a research article around the program. We also I did culturally specific financial aid presentations and financial literacy workshops. So there was a lot of opportunity to, get involved outside of that particular role. And I think that's really critical so that you can build relationships, and it's not as scary as like, you have to come into my office because you haven't submitted your verification documents, right? So I really appreciated that. And I really just feel really passionate about the opportunity to give students resources to be able to pay for higher education. I do believe that higher education should be an opportunity for people's quality of life to improve, and that involves, having upward social mobility. I do see ourselves as higher education administrators as agents of economic mobility. And so what does that mean in practice? And for me, it's really being able to give students the tools to, find and win scholarships, right? And be able to fund their education with the least amount of student loans and the least amount of stress, College Success con Café grew out of me being in grad school. So it was back in 2000. I want to say 16, 17. So I started the blog, and I actually started with a Facebook Live on about FAFSA, and it was before, the lives were a thing. And the reason I did it is because I was working full time, and I was also going to grad school full time. So I really didn't have any time to go do outreach or do presentations. And that was really the rhythm that I was used to, being out in community. And so for me, it was really hard to not be as active and to not be out with parents and teaching them about these things. And so I was really like, what can I do to continue to give this information, or for people to get a hold of me, and doing this Facebook Live, I just said, okay, on Saturday morning while I'm drinking my coffee, I'm going to talk about FAFSA, and it's a bilingual live. So you can, put in the chat all of your questions, and I'll just answer them. And if it's something that's super confidential, then I'll just connect with them, offline. I didn't know what that was going to look like, or if people were going to be interested, but I ended up getting a huge response, like positive response. People loved it. People thought it was like really innovative. It reached people, even outside of the state, and just received a lot of positive feedback. And they're like, you should continue doing these because it's just helpful. Anybody can log on. It's in the morning. And I kept it to half an hour because I'm like, I know anything longer, people lose attention, right? And so I actually started doing lives on Saturday mornings, and I would just invite people over to my house, and we would have coffee, and we would talk about different college topics. And we talked about path to scholarships, which Gerardo, is the co-author, but we talked about just like the importance of attending the workshop. I brought people who serve on scholarship committees to talk about what do they look for. And then everybody was like, anybody can reach out to me if I have questions or whatnot. And so I even had a live with parents. So I had a mom and a dad come talk about their experience of leaving their kids at college and what was that like for them, because nobody really talks about what that looks like and what a big deal it is in our Latino community, right? To be able to do that. So I that's how kind of it started. And then I all of a sudden I started getting people from all over the country just messaging me and would have, just basic financial aid questions, wanted to know where they could find scholarships. Sometimes they would email me their scholarship essays, and so I would just review and give them feedback. And this is all stuff that I would do in my regular job, but I think I was able to have a much bigger platform and be able to talk about these resources to a greater audience. And so that's really how all of College Success con Café started. College Success con Café has evolved from like for it just being like a scholarship blog, right? And then having these lives of the different topics. And I think over the years, as I've gone through my own professional journey and the things that I wish I would have known, or the things I see as a hiring manager, particularly with first gen students, it has really kind of shifted to have a focus on first gen students. And so I started doing lives really talking about first gen college students and first gen professionals. And really the goal is to create more of a network, a virtual network, both for college students and also for professionals, because we have very accomplished professionals who have done really amazing things in our community, right? And oftentimes they have so much desire to help other people. And so while there are opportunities to connect, I think having someone in common or someone they feel comfortable with, connect them, can be so much better. And so I've been doing that for over a year. Sometimes we take a little hiatus depending on workload, but I feel like people have really benefited from the lives. I've had students who have gotten jobs based on the lives. So students who I've interviewed who are like, I want to, be a graphic designer, and someone will message me and be like, I saw your live with this student and I have an opportunity, like, can you connect me with them? And so, so they were able to get kind of a work study job because of this connection. And then somebody got a scholarship, or somebody was like, we're hiring at my organization, would love to connect with the person that you interviewed. And so for me, that I feel like that's so priceless, to be able to make those connections and provide those opportunities. And so I would like to continue expanding and sharing our stories, because I think that it's very powerful when we ourselves are sharing our own stories and we don't let other people do that for us, right? We have such a rich culture and gifts and talents, and I think that it's really important to highlight everybody's contribution, right? And also I find it as a way, particularly when I interview college students, for other students to learn about the college experience from someone closer to their age, right? And to really think about what universities and colleges are safe to attend, right? And where can they be the most successful? And so I think it's just a win-win depending on what type of audience you are, right? In this platform. And so I would love to continue expanding the work, and just being able to continue to connect people and to really highlight all of the work that we're doing, particularly here in Oregon, but just across the country as well. Some people are really open to sharing their stories. Of course, the people that are on the lives, like, love the opportunity to do that. But I would say for those that aren't ready to share their stories, or, don't feel comfortable doing it in front of a camera, I think that there's a lot of different ways to be able to share stories and to connect with people, and to remember that our stories are really powerful and they can really change other people's lives. And I think that, we're living in a world where social justice is very important, where I think we are within a generation that really cares about each other and cares about making a difference and removing barriers for others so that we can all have a good quality of life. And so I would just encourage people to, try it out and share part of their story so that others can get inspired and learn from them as well.